You're listening to the Well Woman podcast. I'm your host, Jema, women's menstrual cycle educator, natural fertility coach, and daytime mermaid. This is a place where we discuss all things periods, poo, ovulation, fertility, and sex. Join me weekly as we rediscover our menstrual cycles, unlock its superpowers, and guide you back into your cyclical nature. Caitlin, welcome to the Well Woman podcast.
Hi, Jema. Thanks for having me.
It is an honor. I love you, sister. We have been journeying together over the last year and a half, and I'm so honored to have you, especially because I don't know of another female wandering menstrual woman who is as connected to nature as what you are. And I could tell so many stories, but I won't yet. So I'll pass it over to you. Tell us what day of recycle are you on and how are you checking in today?
Oh, thanks. Lovely. Yeah, we have had fun together over the last year and a half on our shamanic womencraft journey. I am sitting at day cycle 25. So definitely in the downing end.
Descending.
In the descending end. Feeling quite tired today. I just finished a wild women immersions. We had 40 women out in the bush for the last 10 days, running a full program from sunrise to past sunset. And I had a lot of energy. I was ovulating. It was full moon. It was great vibes. And now I'm definitely like, yep, on the tired end of that one, ready for a rest.
I hear you, especially after doing something so big like that.
Yeah.
Now, I know you'd love to do a welcome to country to kick us off because this is so you and I love that. So is that something you'd still like to do?
Yeah, I just really wanted to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land that I'm on. And I thought that your listeners might like to acknowledge the traditional lands where they are as well. So I'm on Bundjalung country in the north coast of New South Wales, just down the road from you.
Yes.
And yeah, I'd just like to send out some love to all the traditional owners that are here and still practicing their culture and that have mentored me and, you know, are so connected to the land and their ancestors for, you know, the last 80,000 plus forever years. And I also wanted to shout out to everybody out there, like your ancestors as well, like where you come from. So our line of ancestry, whether we're from sort of Celtic countries, European countries, or anywhere else in the world, those of us who were born in Australia, I want to shout out to your people as well and where you come from, because I think it's really beautiful that we can all merge together.
And we can work as a society together. It's surprising to some, but we can.
Yeah, I hope for that for the future for sure.
And I just want to I know so much about you in so many beautiful ways. And I'd love for everyone to get to know you before we talk about these beautiful cycles that we're going to explore with nature today with you. But I'm just going to preface this for everyone because I think I'm going to do a better example at sharing this story than Caitlin because she's probably going to dumb it down. But I don't know another woman who would walk barefoot through Arnhem Land, which is northern territory in Australia. We're talking like you need a permit to get into this land. It's Indigenous run. It always was their land, always will be their land. And she becomes one living on the land, off the land. And I just want to preface this with a hilarious story that completely explains who you are and how you operate. Is that last year together when we were on our vision quest, we were quite close in our camping spots. Couldn't see each other, but we could kind of hear each other from a distance. And while we were finding our spots, I got bitten by the biggest fucking fire ant. Was it a fire ant? Like a fire ant.
I think, it was those big red ants, a jumping jack. They're really aggressive.
Very aggressive. I got bitten by this ant that's probably the size of an inch, like 4 centimeters. And I'll never forget, Caitlin's like, I've got the antidote. She runs into the bush out of nowhere, pulls out this whole plant. We're talking like a sapling, so something that's probably like 80 centimeters grown out of the ground, so well-established roots. She grabs the roots, rubs it with her fingers, and she's like, you need to make it soapy. She makes this soapy paste from these roots and then rubs it on my leg where I got bitten by the ant, which was stinging like a mofo. And in that moment, within like a couple of minutes, it had gone, like just dissipated. And I was in chronic pain at that time. And I will never forget, because I just remember looking at being like, who the F are you? Like, this is
Yeah.
cool. I want to. And I was like, I'm so glad that you are only like 100, 200 meters from where I'm camping alone for 4 days in the bush with nothing but some water and some almonds. So this is who
Oh.
Caitlin is. So do you want to describe who you are and how you got into this amazing work with nature and the deep work that you have with culture here in Australia?
Yeah. Oh, so funny. Yeah, just your friendly wild witch, just to help you when you have an ant bite. Yeah, so originally I studied wildlife ecology, and I've worked as a wildlife ecologist on and off for most of my career. So the last 20 years or so, went from being like a zookeeper and, doing all the animal things and presentations, and then wildlife caring, so looking after lots of baby animals, and then working in not-for-profit space in conservation. And now I work for local government in threatened species conservation. And so that's sort of my bread and butter job that I sort of have to do to pay rent.
A
But
side job of being a
yeah,
wild witch.
it funds the other fun stuff. And then the other fun stuff is, helping women and children connect with nature. So I run nature connection programs. I have a little bush school, which is really fun. I have 10 4-year-old children 1 day a week. And then I run these immersive programs for women and short day workshops as well in nature connection, bushcraft, weaving, wild foods, how to make primitive fire, so making fire with your hands. And yeah, I just want to be outside as much as humanly possible. Like everywhere in life, every turn is just like, go outside, go outside, go outside. So anything outside, hiking, exploring, diving, climbing, I'm into it.
And when you think of Caitlin camping, she's not camping with a tent and a blow-up mattress and a beautiful pillow and a nice doona cover. She's camping in a hammock, hanging between two trees, wild out there in
Yeah,
nature.
I love my hammock, and it draws a lot of attention actually when I go camping. People are like, "Oh, how are you in like that's not comfortable?" I'm like, "It's the most comfortable thing I've ever slept in. It's more comfortable than my bed at home." I've been spending the last 5 nights sleeping literally on the ground in a shelter that we built with the women we're on the immersion with. And my job was I facilitated them to stay out in the wild shelters every night that we built, just to, help their confidence and empower them to, sleep wild. And I was sleeping just with a sleeping bag on the ground every night. I literally came home last night in my bed and I woke up incredibly sore from my bed. I was like, I'm sorer sleeping in a bed than on the floor for 5 days. So take me back to the floor, to the ground.
I thought you were going to be like, so I hung the hammock up inside the house between the lounge room and the kitchen just to get a bit of elevation. But that's so you, and that's one of the big things I absolutely love about you, because you are truly connected. And I've never met anyone else ever in like all of the travels I've done all over the world and all over Australia who is that connected to nature. And it's so inspiring. And today we're talking about the cycles of nature and how they connect with us as humans, and particularly menstruators and women, because I think we have a deep cyclic connection. I froth on all this shit. I know all the stuff you're about to share, but our listeners don't. So do you want to tell us, like, what are the cycles of nature and how do you see us as menstruators connect with those cycles of nature?
Yeah. Oh, there's just so much in this. I'm like, why do we even care about this? Like, why do we need to connect the cycles? It's just like, it is our human nature, right? So we are nature. We're not separate from nature. We're human animals. And just like every other animal out there, every other living thing out there, we have a place in the ecology in nature. And so humans have this really important role. We're sort of the engineers of the land. We're able to like move whole landscapes, just like ants and elephants can as well. Even scrub turkeys, look how much leaf litter they're moving around. Humans have this great capacity for shaping landscapes. And so we have a really important role in the ecology of this place as well. Depending where you live, if you're in the southern hemisphere like me or up in the northern hemisphere, which is obviously opposite. So we're in spring at the moment, just entering spring, and our Northern Hemisphere friends are just entering autumn. So whether you know it or not, you are affected by the cycles of nature every second of every day. And yeah, I like to remind women and menstruators, especially, that you are affected by this stuff, whether you know it or not. It's happening. It's happening all around us. If you go outside right now, you'll see the weather is shifting. The landscape is shifting as we move from one season to another. So I saw two snakes mating or fighting or something yesterday. They were just attacking each other. It's either a very interesting foreplay tactic, or it was two males going for it, but they were pushing each other's heads down, and one would go higher and then it would push the other one's head down. And two tiger snakes sort of in this battle. And I just went, oh yeah, that is the indicator to me that it's very much spring. And in our area, we've had lots of other signals. The whales are almost disappearing. They're heading back down to Antarctica, so we say goodbye to the whales. A lot of the wattle is finishing its bloom.
I know, I'm pretty sad about that.
We've had beautiful yellow wattle flowering. And so there's lots of indicators. The wind has changed direction as well. And we've been getting thunderstorms. So we've been getting these early spring thunderstorms that indicate, okay, something's shifting in the landscape. It's been really dry up until this point, and we can feel it in our skin and we can feel it in our body that spring is about to spring. We feel a bit more energized and oh, okay, I need to get out in the world a little bit more. What projects can I start? Yeah, so there are so many levels to this cyclical living, and of course they're on a macro scale, worldwide, and seeing the seasonal shifts, and then our daily cycles. So looking at the sun cycle, so when we wake up in the morning, we get that beautiful sun on our face, we're producing melatonin and serotonin and all those happy hormones when the sun hits our face in the morning. That helps us to go to sleep at night as well at a decent time. And then we're of course affected by the moon, our lunar monthly cycle, that 28.5-day cycle, of course, that our menstrual cycle is in tune with. So currently I'm bleeding on the new moon and ovulating on the full moon. And if we're living really connected to nature, a lot of nature connected cultures, they live in this way. So you're having a retreat time, at the new moon, it's the darkness, we're going inward. And then when you're ovulating, you're like, woo, having a party, going to have sex, going to make babies. It's all that spring, that summer energy. So yeah, there's these daily, weekly, monthly, and yearly cycles that all of Earth's creatures are influenced by, and we're not any different to that, which is pretty cool.
It's very cool. And I think it's always funny when people think we are so separate. I love to remind people that we are animals, and that we live so much more amplified to Earth when we spend time connecting with Earth, whether that's surrounding yourself in the forest for a walk, or walking by a creek or a river, or walking on the beach, or being in some submission of water, whether that's a river, a dam, the ocean. It really connects you on a deeper level. And I think the more you do that, the more the amplification of that is felt. And I know for me, after spending 3 months across the top end of Australia last year, living in a tent, so connected to nature, and just sun's down, you're down, the sun's up, you're up, and it's just such a beautiful, really, really humbling and beautiful experience that I actually wish for everyone to have a chance in their lifetime to experience, at least 3 full moon cycles in nature, to experience, 3 new moons or 3 full moons. That's magical, really, really magical. So where do you want to go to from here? Do you want to talk about how our cycle in nature in the outer world shows up in our inner world? Do you want to talk about that with the menstrual cycle?
Yeah, I'd love to. And also just, with that, and I loved what you said, it's worth mentioning that, our ancestors have been doing this forever, right? So it's only been like 0.001% of the whole of humanity's history over the last million or so years. Our early human ancestors, became sort of like us about 1 million years ago. And then Homo sapiens came on the scene about 300,000 years ago. So for most of human history, we have been living in the forest or, on the tundra or in the meadow or on the coast, not inside four walls, maybe times of the year when you had to like get shelter from the extreme weather, but our lifestyles were completely outdoors. So whether you're sleeping on grass and hay and, eating wild foods and, you're intimately connected with the cycles. So just remember that that was for most of human history. So all of our ancestors, no matter where your ancestry is from, they've only really recently, since like the Industrial Revolution, since the colonization of Australia, in my Australian context, had this sort of modern way of living, thanks to, the patriarchy and colonialism and the Industrial Revolution, and all these so-called like progressions in our society. But before that, we lived by candlelight. When it was dark, you went to sleep, and if you wanted to see something, you had this beautiful ambient, soft light that didn't interfere with, your melatonin production, so you could actually go to sleep at night. So yeah, just a reminder to everybody out there that like this is who we are on a cellular level, and our brains really haven't changed much. They're quite they're very complex, of course, but they're still quite primitive. Like I was using the example the other day. I was harvesting wild food for a group, and we're chatting about sugar. I'm like, sugar was so rare in nature, and that's why we still crave it. We think that little, we see that little Davidson plum hanging in the tree, and our mouths start to salivate. They're like, oh, sugar. It was so rare for many of our
or
ancestors.
A honey sack, like
a
sugar sack in
yeah,
a tree, and
exactly.
dipping your whole hand in that and sucking on all your fingers, getting all that native bee honey. Oh my God, yum. Yes.
So yeah, our brains are still so primitive that when we see sugar, we think that we need it. We need it, even though we can so quickly get that fix now. And our brains are still tricking us into thinking that we really need this thing that was really, really rare in nature. Even though it's everywhere we turn now, there's just sugar in absolutely everything. And, we're all, of course, overdosing on it, and it's not good for us. So, our brains can trick us a little bit in that. But we're still so connected to these practices, these nature connection practices, and these parts of ourselves that really we've forgotten. So our ancestors were practicing these things, really, really recently in terms of time. It's just a drop in the ocean that we've been in this industrial revolution. So I just like to remind people of that. You are nature, and it's your birthright to connect with nature and connect to wild places. And whether you live in a city or a really like urbanized place, or whether you already live in the bush, there's some really cool little techniques you can use. There's some cool little things you can do looking at your life cyclically, and you help you sort of make those tweaks to align and become more nature connected in your own lives. So yeah, we can dive into some of those things if you like.
Please. How do you? I'm sure there's all these people who are like, I live in the city in an apartment, and I'd love to grow herbs, but I don't even have a balcony. Like those kinds of people, but also those who are menstruators who are like, I have a deep calling. I think I know you would agree with this, is that you really need to listen to your womb and listen to your intuition. Like if you have a deep calling that nature is calling you and it needs you, or, you want to be surrounded in nature, but you don't know how to make that happen. What are the ways we can connect with nature to bring nature to us, not just always have to go into nature?
Yeah, that's such a beautiful question. And it's actually so simple. It's so simple. We don't have to buy expensive equipment or like drive for miles and miles and miles or get hiking boots and like learn how to camp, because a lot of women that I chat to, they're like, oh, I'm too scared to go hiking by myself, or I'm too scared to go camping by myself. And, those fears are totally valid. If you don't know what you're doing, you shouldn't like put yourself in those situations, because they can things happen. It's nice to get a group of girlfriends together who want to, do these things with you and get a hiking buddy. But yeah, for those of you that are living, in the city or finding it really difficult to access parts of nature, we don't need these like really wild spaces or national parks in order to do that. We can bring it down to such a basic level. And so every day we're blessed with the cycle of the sun, right? So the sun rises in the morning, usually around 6 a.m., depending on where you are in the world, but usually it's around 6 a.m. And it sets around 6 p.m. at night. So we've got this beautiful time during the day that we can connect with light. And light is actually one of the most foundational, basic things that indicate human health that's out there. And there's a lot of research about this coming out now about how important light is to our brains, to our hormone production, to our menstrual cycles, like massively. And so a really, really simple practice that you can do is simply just looking at the sunrise every morning and looking at the sunset every afternoon. And what that does is it floods your body with all the appropriate hormones that you need to wake up in the morning and then to go to sleep at night. And that does a whole host of things to our hormones that's super, super important for, fertility and just general health. So connecting with light is such a basic fundamental thing. And like people bang on about it and they're like, they wear the blue blocker glasses and, there's all these things you can buy now. But yeah, that's a really, really basic thing. It's just connecting with our sun cycle every day. And then you'll notice over time, there's this beautiful thing that happens when it's approaching summer and the summer solstice, which is the longest daylight in the year. So the longest day in the year, the days are getting longer and longer and longer. And then after the summer solstice, the days are getting shorter and shorter and shorter until we hit the winter solstice, the deep winter, which is our shortest day of the year, which just means the sun rises the latest and sets the earliest. So we get the shortest number of hours of actual daylight. And our ancestors were all watching this. They were so into the cosmos, like massively. It's where astrology's come from. There's Aboriginal Australian communities here that have like documented over 3,000 stars, and that's like that they know. Like there's just been so much cultural information that's been lost from this country particularly. But everybody, all our ancestors were looking at the stars all the time and looking at the sun and looking at the moon, and they knew exactly what was going on based on those things. And so yeah, connecting with the sun, really important. Connecting with the moon as well. So I've found this to be a really beautiful practice, is just every night before you go to bed, go outside and just see what the moon's doing. Look up. Just go outside and look up. You might see some other beautiful, amazing things too. And we always feel better when you look up and you see a starry sky. You just can't be angry or upset anymore. At all the things that happened that day or that week. It's just like, oh, so nice.
Nothing compares to waking up in the middle of nowhere with no artificial light seen anywhere and getting up to do a midnight wee. You're doing your poppy squatty and you're looking up and it's just like, whoa, look at the stars. And you feel like you're in a space movie. Like
it just blows my mind.
Does it ever?
Every time. It's like, oh, it's amazing. And so that's one way that we can connect with nature, is just see what the stars are doing, see what the moon's doing. Because these bodies, so they're planets that are obviously sitting off planet Earth, but we're all influencing each other, right? The energies of the different planets are influencing us. Where their position is in the sky, they're influencing us. If they're closer, if they're further away. Obviously, the moon is a massive one. So if the moon is approaching full or new, that's pulling the water down to our poles, which is giving us super, super low tides and super, super high tides. If you've paid attention to the tides, if you live on the coast, you'll notice that they really, really fluctuate a lot around that full and new moon, and that's called a neap tide. So the spring tide is like the normal equal length tides, and the neap tide is when it's like super, super low, super, super high. And people don't know these things are all connected. It's like once you start doing these cycles together and overlapping them, you just go, what? That's connected to that, is connected to that, is connected to that. What the
Like
hell?
being a kid and singing that song, you know, your thigh bone's connected to your hip bone, your hip bone's connected to your, yeah, like just it goes on and on
That's
and on.
amazing. I know. And the fact that like our menstrual cycles are tied in with the moon just also blows my mind. And it's just, and yeah, as your listeners may know, there's only a couple of animals on planet Earth that actually menstruate. So it's humans, of course, I think it's orcas and one of the primate species. So, we've given this amazing opportunity. We can cycle with the moon, exactly the same cycle length on average, of course. Everyone's got different cycle lengths, but on average, it's 28 days. And that's the cycle of the moon. And so, in looking up at the moon, just like our ancestors did, we know where in the lunar cycle we are. We know, obviously, if the moon is becoming full, you might get more energy. You hear about, there's extra police patrols out of the full moon or whatever the
Kids get
stories
more
are about.
crazy on the full moon.
Yeah, and that's where the word lunatic
Lunatics.
came from.
Yep.
So as we're approaching full moon, energetically in our bodies, we might be feeling more energetic as well. We might be feeling like clarity. Things in our lives have become illuminated to us. Maybe we, have some really serious revelations and realizations about things in our lives. And it's a great time to journal that as well as the full moon is peaking. And then, when it starts waning, when it starts getting smaller, we might feel that drop in energy. We might be entering our luteal phase, of course, and slowing down and beginning to rest and really, really winding things down as we begin to bleed. And then going into bleeding time is the dark moon. So completely black sky before we see the little crescent.
Very dark.
Here. Yeah, the dark moon, and then switches over to new moon. And we can have, beautiful realizations, or I definitely do. I'm having moments of inner reflection, just like, oh, what changes can I make this month? Or like, how am I feeling this month? You might make plans for the next month. It's a new beginning. It's a new cycle. And yeah, the more and more that you connect with the moon and look at the moon, you might notice actually your cycle, your menstrual cycle might start changing a little bit as well. Because it's like, oh, those little hormones are switching on. When we're inside all night, when we're sort of indoors and we're watching TV, we're on our phones, might be watching the latest season of whatever. I tried to watch and Just Like That, and I'm trying to get into it because apparently it's really good. The new Sex and the City. So we might be watching TV, and then all these different lights are flooding our eyes and flooding our brains than if we were sitting outside. So yeah, just remembering before you go to bed, we're winding down. We want to have a good night's sleep. So connecting in with the moon and the stars might help us to do that as well. And that comes back to that light thing. So light being really important, or a lack of light in the evening can be really, really supportive for women who are particularly trying to have a really restful night, have a good night's sleep. My holistic doctor calls it sleep hygiene. It's like, how's your sleep hygiene going? I'm like, what's that? But yeah, it's just making sure you're getting enough light during the day, and then not sitting indoors all day. That helps too. Go outside. And where else are we up to with our cycles? So we've talked about the moon, we've talked about the sun. Oh, something else really cool that we can then start to add layers onto this cycle, like a map, right? This is a perpetual map that never ends, right? This is a cyclical way of living that, daily, weekly, monthly, seasonally, and then annually. And it just goes round and round and round, and it never ends. So diving into our seasons, there's the peak of summer, which we chatted about before, might be aligning with our full moon time. So when everybody, there's so many parties in summer. We just want to party. We're just like, woo! And we can align that with the time of our cycle when we're feeling our most juicy, our most vibrant, our most like wanting to sort of go out in the world. We make all our plans, and then, maybe in winter or when we're at the dark end of the cycle, we're like, oh, why did I make all those plans? I'm actually so tired. So
that happens for people in their menstrual cycle and in the annual cycle
oh
too.
my gosh,
Like a
it's
lot.
so
And I also think in summer, a lot of people now there's two types of summer. So you've got Northern Hemispherian summer, and I think they get a little bit more of a chill summer than what we do because their summer break is just summer. Whereas in the Southern Hemisphere, and I won't go on a rant about this because you and I could probably rant about this for a long time, but we celebrate our summer season whilst we're also celebrating the beginning of the Gregorian calendar year. We're also celebrating the turn of the winter festival of Christmas or Christ,
yes,
or Saint Nick, as people like to call it if they like giving gifts.
Oh my gosh.
And so we're celebrating a lot of core winter festivals at the peak of our summer. And so we have this fire on fire season. In traditional Chinese medicine, call summer the fire season. It's like fire on fire, and that just creates more fire. And so I know a lot of people who like overcommit in summer, and that's where we can get really burnt out. And I think that's quite common for people in the Southern Hemisphere, more so than what I've heard in the Northern Hemisphere, because I think people love the summer so much, but then also people in the Southern Hemisphere feel like they haven't had a summer because they've been too busy catching up with all their friends, or they haven't had a break. They get to the end of their summer break and they're like, oh my God, I still need a holiday after my holiday. And I've done, I feel like I've done nothing for myself.
Totally. It's not a restful time. Like, even though you might be like sitting on the beach and like, sunbaking or whatever, it's just full on socializing, and it's hot and it's intense. And it's just like our bodies are just like, oh, they're craving like deep nourishment. And so, yeah, and we're celebrating Yule or Christmas at a time when, our ancestors, if you've got Celtic ancestry like myself, we're celebrating Yule, which is traditionally a Christmas festival. So we've got all the snow globes and the snowmen and, all that sort of paraphernalia.
Santa wears a beanie,
oh my
coat,
gosh,
boots, and long pants with fur on them whilst it's 45 degrees.
Sorry, joking.
So it's quite interesting, like when we start to reflect on this, and I know when I first learned about this a few years ago, I was like, yeah, this kind of doesn't make sense. And you can also look at that. There's two other festivals that you know of as well that we celebrate in reference to the Northern Hemispherian calendar, but we celebrate them at the Southern Hemispherian time based on the Northern Hemisphere. And it kind of
don't get me started.
Has this, we're going on a rant, but I think this is a good topic, and we can kind of maybe wrap up our cycles and cycles with this, is that it's really, actually, let's go to where and how this happened. So our Northern Hemispherian friends moved to the South because of the discovery of the lands of the South that were already inhabited by other people. And at this time, those other people were quite different to the Northern Hemispherian people in how they lived and how they dressed and their, what they did with their time, etc. And so in this moment, a lot of the Northern Hemispherians who came to colonize we'll say Western colonized the southern parts of the country, or not the country, sorry, the world, brought their Northern Hemispherian festivals. And they brought with them their festivals, and they brought with them knowing that they all had always done this festival on the 21st of December, or they'd always done this festival at this time of July or June or August or September or February or March. And so there was no alternation or change based on the changing seasons. And back then, maybe they didn't know the Southern Hemisphere was different to the Northern Hemisphere like we do today.
That's right.
But at the same time, we still live in accordance to that. And one example is that we celebrate a spring festival in the Southern Hemisphere's autumn, which is called Easter, which is also known as Ostara, which sounds very similar to Easter, right? So what's your 2 cents on these cycles within the cycles, and how we are all cyclical and we have cyclical festivals of the year?
Yeah, it's wild. And I believe this is how we have lost our way as a society. We're not connected to nature. Like, look at what we've done to our beautiful country. We came and we cleared, like my ancestors certainly, came and we cleared the lands, we didn't see the value in this landscape. We didn't see the value in our local people. We didn't see the value in, you know, the bush medicine and the foods and the plethora of superfoods that we have in our backyards. You know, our ancestors turned their nose up at them and said, oh, you know, what the Aboriginal people are eating is dirty and disgusting, and you know, they're animals, and they weren't seen as you know, members of society until really, really recently in history. So I really believe this is the core of a lot of our problems in society. And if we just connect back in with the natural cycles, like the true natural cycles, then we won't be celebrating these essentially Christian festivals and at the wrong time of year. So yeah, you know, Halloween being celebrated in spring as opposed to in autumn as we're about to dive into winter. It's like a death festival, Day of the Dead celebration.
It's like All Hallows Eve is where Halloween comes from. And that's why
oh my
you
gosh.
have pumpkins, because it's an autumn time and that's when pumpkins grow. We're fishing for pumpkins in spring.
Yeah,
So that
they're
we
not
can,
ripe here.
yeah, and they're tiny compared to how big they are, you know, manifested over the summer to be harvested
Yeah,
at the autumn time. So,
crazy. Yeah, so if we, you know, I'm encouraging everybody to sort of like locate where you are in the world and look at the traditional ceremonies that you're celebrating. You know, yeah, Christmas is a classic one, Halloween, which has begun to be celebrated in Australia now a lot more. We never used to have it. It's very American festival. And you know, look at it and just go, well, does this make sense? Like, is this seasonally appropriate? And I know a lot of friends now with kids, they're really getting them to understand that, oh, okay, like, yes, everybody else is celebrating this time, but we can celebrate Halloween, you know, in autumn time as well. Like maybe they do go and have a little celebration with their friends, but also acknowledging the true, Day of the Dead or Hallows Eve in autumn time, and celebrating with pumpkins when it's seasonally appropriate. And also looking to, you know, our abundance of local foods we have here. And our Aboriginal custodians had so many festivals around different food harvests. There's like the bunya nut harvest, the mullet harvest, the mullet run is when the whales coming in. And there's so many amazing local native fruits and vegetables that, you know, we just don't know about. So yeah, I encourage everybody to find out in your local area how you can celebrate in touch with the seasons, and that will make our bodies happy. Our bodies will be like, oh, this makes sense. I'm eating this food and it's medicine because it's seasonally appropriate. The food's really nourishing for us, and it makes sense in our bodies, and it's how our ancestors lived.
And how do you think that helps women and menstruators support their cycle? I'd love to get your outlook on this.
Oh, it's massive, I think. I think it's really a missing piece of the puzzle. And if you've got a lot of health issues, like I have quite a lot of, in the past, I had quite a lot of reproductive health issues. I was diagnosed with endometriosis, and I've had a lot of pain during sex, a lot of scar tissue, irregular cycles, heavy bleeding, you name it. And, you know, I think that if I had known about this when I was younger, I just think I would be much more healthful version of myself now. Like I've been working on my health a lot over the last 10 years, and this has been one of the most key pieces for me, is connecting in with the cycles of nature and connecting in with my menstrual cycle particularly. So now these days, you know, just looking at the moon and really getting to know my cycle and tracking my cycle, and then overlaying that with I use the temp drop thermometer to look at my temperature. So I'm looking at when my temperature spikes and, you know, what my progesterone's doing and what my estrogen's doing. And I didn't know this stuff when I was younger. And now that I know it, I'm like, oh my God, everybody needs to know this stuff because it's so like easily available now for one, but it is so important whether you're a menstruating person or not to just connect in with the cycles, because it completely radically changes our health and our hormones and everything that's connected to our cycles in the human body. So yeah.
One thing can I add to that is that
Totally.
what we don't realize is that, you know, our production of FSH actually can be triggered by light. And it can be triggered particularly by moonlight and then angle of the natal moon, the moon in which you're born under, the angle. So I'm talking about the ascending moon or the descending moon or star sign. I'm talking about the exact angle between the earth, the sun, and the moon at the time you were born. And that angle can change and influence hormonal structure. And I think the more we can connect with nature, the more we can amplify and better understand ourselves. But for a lot of people, that can seem quite challenging. And so I like to encourage people to connect with your own cycle first, allow that to be an inspiration, connect with the inner seasons of yourself, and then start to look at the outer seasons and how they respond or could be quite similar. What's your anything to add to that you think would be worthwhile for our listeners?
I love that. And I think they come hand in hand, because it's, a big problem these days is that people aren't empowered to make decisions about their health. People don't have sovereignty over their own health. They're waiting for an expert or a doctor or somebody else to tell them what's going on in their body. And, as women, as menstruators, as people on this planet, like, we're so in tune to what's going on inside our bodies as well as outside of our bodies. And we just need to remember how bloody powerful we are. Like, we are so powerful, and we're so intuitive, actually, when we strip away a lot of the noise and a lot of the busyness and a lot of the technology and the distractions. We're actually so in tune, just like a child is. A baby tells you what they need, right? We don't lose that ability as adults. We just sort of get too busy that we don't listen to ourselves. So remember that you're super intuitive and powerful, and you can connect in with your cycles. And it's as simple as, just connecting with the sun and the moon, and connecting with nature on a physical level as well, going barefoot, like literally put your feet on the ground. Like, I know you love wearing bare feet as well.
I love not wearing shoes. I can be that person in the shopping center. I don't mind.
So, like, literally connecting with the ground, just like our ancestors have done forever, can really bring a balance to your body. And it sounds pretty crazy. It sounds like too far-fetched or too woo-woo. But if we just bring it right back to basics and think about how your ancestors lived, we can't get it wrong, because we've just really overcomplicated everything. And it's all too, if you listen to all these health experts, it's like, oh my gosh, I don't know which way to go. But I think giving people sovereignty over their own body. Yeah. So I totally echo what you say, but I'm connecting with yourself first, and then looking at how you fit in to the world, and what your body's telling you. Like, is it leading you down this path? Is it leading you down this path? Like, there's so many people walking around who don't sort of know their place or their role on earth, and how your soul chooses to sort of to move in the world, is really important. Like, we like having a sense of purpose, and we like helping people, and we want to be acknowledged and seen, and we want to belong to community. We want to belong to a sisterhood.
Yep.
So but yeah, connecting in with your own cycles firstly is amazing. And then, looking all around us, like spending time in the garden, looking at the cycles of your own garden on a micro level. If you've got a little balcony, growing your herbs, connecting with the cycles of those herbs, and then, looking at the outer ecology, or moving outside your little apartment zone, and going out and going, wow, what's going on in the world out there?
So sad. It's so sad for me when my coriander or cilantro, depending on where you live in the world, goes to seed, and I'm like, no, it's not the
missed
seed.
it.
Oh,
you missed it.
Surrender. Like, you've just got total surrender. You can't force food to grow in times of the year when it's not designed to grow in that climate or that time.
Yeah. So, oh my gosh.
So good. Now, sorry, you go. Something else you want to add?
Something really important that I want to add, actually, is we can't do these things on our own. So, we can do things on our own. We're like amazing, powerful humans, right? Like, we can do shit. We can be alone in the bush and we can survive, if we had to. But it's like, we don't need to struggle, right? We have our community and our sisters. And the most important thing that a tool that I've used to learn about all these things is to get a mentor, get a really amazing mentor, whether that's, someone in your community or someone online. a lot of people say to me all the time, like, how do you know all this stuff about animals, or how do you know all this stuff about nature? I'm like, I hang out with people who are beautiful and pass their wisdom on to me, like often older women. And I'm just listening. I'm just like soaking up like a
The
sponge, just all
sponge.
this juicy information. And then I can pass that on to people, now and when I'm older in my life, and when I'm in my Marga phase, and when I'm a crone, when, I'm an elder. So I just want to shout out to my beautiful mentors in my life who've taught me so much. Jade Hardwick Collings from the School of Shamanic Womencraft, who taught me all about how these cycles are connected. So I was already, I was doing it, but it's just like I hadn't put it all together. It's like, oh my gosh, it just makes so much sense. And she's just such a wise woman and so open to sharing with
She's
everybody.
such a sage essence, isn't she?
She is so good.
She's gonna love that.
And
If you ever listen to this, Jane, you're such a sage essence.
yeah. Shout out to Jane. And also my mentor, Kate Ridge, who's beautiful, beautiful woman from Gumbaynggirr country. She runs Nature Philosophy, and I did my Nature Connection teacher training with her. And she just took me to Arnhem Land to see her Aboriginal family up there, and we spent time weaving with the women up there. And I've learned so much from her about how to embrace my feminine power, and it just really empowered me and getting connected with nature and myself on a deeper level. And my life will never be the same now that I know this information, particularly from those two mentors. But I've had so many amazing mentors in my life. So if you're sort of new to all of this and you're like, where do I start? Get in touch with a local community near you who does nature connection work or shamanic womencraft work. Yeah.
Follow
Super
Caitlin
important.
online. She's got amazing stories, and I'm always like, I tell people about you all the time. Like, oh, here's a link to her Instagram bio.
Come to my workshop. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think it's particularly in Australia, it's quite what we could call a lost art, but it's actually just an undiscovered art, I feel, for a lot of people who are not traditional, custodians of the land. I think that it's just an undiscovered. And when I discovered it, because I wouldn't call it, I learned it, like I discovered it for myself through like traveling and learning and reading and meeting people like you. Like that rediscovery is really, really fascinating. And yeah, there's lots of places you can learn from. And I'm going to make sure we include all of your links in our bio show notes. So tell us, how can people connect with you? Like, I've got two more questions I want to ask you, but while we're talking about it, like, what's the best place for them to go? Okay, what is Caitlin's Instagram handle and where can I learn more about her? She also has an amazing map. I can't show you, but it's on my wall in my office. And I love hanging it up. It's the Wild Cycles map by Your Business Life Wild. So tell us, how can people actually find you if they want to learn more about you and your work in this area?
Yeah, please come and find me. I'm super approachable and I love just like going out bushwalking with anybody who's like, I need to go bushwalking. I'm like, I will take you to this awesome spot. But yeah, if you're in the Northern Rivers, I'm Wild Search on Instagram. So just at Wild Search. My business name is Life Wild. And yeah, I like when I got all this cycle stuff sort of explained to me, I was like, I need like a visual representation of this. And I was just mucking around one night and I just made this map that is a really sort of pretty way to tie it all together. And it's got all the cycles of the sun, the moon, like north, south, east, west, all the directions, the seasonal calendar, time of year. It overlaps with the permaculture cycles as well, and the menstrual cycles and the cycles of a woman's life. So it's all there on an A3 poster. And I tell everybody, like, stick it on your toilet door so that, your partner sees it and your kids like, what's that? And
Put it on the fridge.
all your visitors. Yeah, put it on your fridge or behind your toilet door. You can laminate it. So I made those posters just as a way that I can remember to connect to what's important. And I thought I would share that with everybody as well. I run workshops in weaving and wild food foraging as well. If you're interested in learning about those things, I take people on hiking adventures as well. And working with a group called Nature Culture, running these beautiful immersive nature programs for women called the Wild Women Immersion. And the next one's in May. It goes for 10 days. And yeah, if you want a transformative experience in nature and you really want to shake up your life, if you're feeling a bit stuck, come along. It's
to reconnect,
oh,
as we say.
that's right. It's so much fun. Yeah, we collected everybody's phones voluntarily. We said, who wants to give over their phones for the week? And everyone's like throwing their phones at me. Yeah, so it was really beautiful, beautiful time. I actually just want to do that all the time. I just want to sit in the forest with fellow humans who just froth on nature with me. So yeah, come and hang out in the Northern Rivers with us, and yeah, connect with me on Instagram. My website's lifewild.com.au as well. Love to hear from you.
Thank you. Well, I will pop them in the show notes. Now, 2 questions. One question I want to ask you really quickly before we ask the last podcast question is, I would love to know, what is your knowledge about menstruating on the earth and any wisdom around that you have learned from any of your beautiful mentors or teachers about giving your blood back to the earth and connecting with earth or country whilst menstruating?
Oh, I love that. There's been a lot of conversation around that on the socials. Actually, I've seen some quite negative and quite positive feedback about that. But my personal opinion is that menstruators have been putting their blood on the earth for as long as humans have existed. And this is the blood that, you know, makes our babies. Like, it's the beautiful endometrial lining, and it's so important for nourishing life. And there's nothing wrong with it. There's nothing dirty about it. It's not, you know, full of toxins like people say. It's beautiful, beautiful, nourishing fertilizer for the earth. And we have this communion with earth where, you know, when we breathe out carbon dioxide, plants breathe that in, and then they give us oxygen. We breathe that in, right? So we're in total communion with the plants as animals. And so us bleeding in the earth is just us fertilizing the plants. And of course, when we die, we're just eaten by the worms and eaten by the plants. And, you know, we eat the plants, and it's all one big cycle. Yeah, so I'm totally for it. I think it's amazing. I know Jane, our mentor, is like a really big advocate for women bleeding on the earth, and it's actually going to lift the consciousness of planet Earth. And I'm like, yes. I think it's so powerful. And if you can, possibly, whether you catch it in a cup or if you have your undies, like I love using the menstrual underwear. That's my favorite, life-changing. And you know, you can rinse it out in a bucket and pour it on your plants outside. Yeah, I think the more women that are and menstruators who are bleeding on the earth, you know, the happier the earth will be. That's definitely my opinion.
I love that. I love that. It's great to hear different people's understanding or you know, thoughts or feelings around it, because it is really, really powerful. And something I'll add is that, you know, our menstrual blood, when we have a healthy bleed, so I'm not talking about a bleed that's extremely dark and black, that's been quite stagnant for a few cycles, but a healthy menstrual bleed also is very rich in stem cells. And we can utilize those, whether we are painting our face with a face mask or whether we are putting it, you know, on sores. I've done this in the past. You know, if I've had a burn or a cut or something, I've been using that as, you know, along with honey outside of my menstrual time to help replenish my skin. But at the same time, we can also give that back to the earth where it's really well needed. So I love that. Thank you for sharing. All right, last podcast question.
Yeah.
I'd love to hear your thoughts. We ask every guest this question. What are 3 things you wish you had have known when you started menstruating that you now know today? What are 3 things you wish you had known when you started menstruating that you now know today?
Just that there's nothing wrong with my bodily functions. There's nothing wrong with me. You know, so many of my sort of reproductive dysfunctions were becoming apparent when I started menstruating, and all these doctor's visits, and, you know, everyone's like, oh, there's something wrong with you. And as a teenager, it's just like, what? There's something wrong with me. And I got this real anxiety around medical issues. And I would just love to tell my younger self that, like, there's nothing wrong with you, beautiful girl. Like, you're perfect just the way that you are. And, you might need help releasing some of this tension that you're experiencing and some of these stresses. And I just didn't have the tools to be able to let that energy flow through my body. And so it got stuck. I believe that's, what caused my dis-ease in my body was this energy getting stuck that I didn't know how to move. Yeah. And number 2 is probably just connecting with the cycles. Like I had no idea about all this stuff. I wish somebody told me about this when I was in high school. I wish like they talked about it every day, because it wouldn't have been enough if just, someone came and had one talk to the girls, I wish this was part of my childhood and growing up. And I wish this was something that my mother had known and my grandmother had known, but all this information was sort of hidden from us, whether, intentional or not. So I wish I knew that connecting with the cycles was really, really important. And I also wish that I had mentors earlier on, and now I'm really feeling the power of that now. How important mentorship is in my life and being in community. So after trying to do everything alone, in my 20s, it was all about my solo pursuits, and I'm going to hike 200 kilometers by myself, and I'm going to do this by myself, and I'm a strong woman. I think, the true definition of a strong woman for me is someone who can rest in community and can, support other people, especially young people, and not doing it alone. I think, I would have really thrived at a much younger age if I'd known those things. But here I'm floundering around in my 30s, just trying to like learn all the things. And
That's beautiful. I love it. 3 things I also wish I had have known. It took me a long time to do that. I didn't do any 200-kilometer hikes alone, but definitely, in my maiden, trying to do the things that you don't really have to do. And I think it's all very humbling for everybody listening. So thank you so much for being here and sharing some of your wisdom about cyclical nature and the cycles within the cycles, and how nature cycles can connect with our menstrual cycle and how it can help us amplify our connection with our menstrual cycle. I'm so, so honored and privileged. And I just love you with all of my heart. Dear, dear place of my heart, sister. And thank you. I'm so, so blessed that you had the chance to be here, and you could make the time for us. So thank you.
Oh, thank you, Jema. I love you too. And we'll catch up and go for a hike really soon.
Bush florage, I know.
Thanks so much.
Thank you so much for tuning into every episode of the Well Woman podcast. For everything we mentioned in today's episode, you can find this in the show notes over at wellsome.com/podcast. If this episode excited you, please hit follow on Spotify, which means all of my episodes will pop up in your feed weekly, so you never miss a weekly drop. I'd love you to leave a review on Apple Podcasts too. Love this episode? Come and follow me over on Instagram at wellsome_Jema. Say hi and share what you've taken away from this episode with me. Now, is there a bestie, sister, or a friend who who might be fed up, frustrated, and confused with their cycles? Are they ready to join you in awakening their cyclical essence too? Well, take a screenshot of this podcast episode, share it on your socials, email it, text it, or any way you need to get it to them. So together we can all live in flow, harmony, and balance with our cycles. Now, until next time, beautiful, get connected, listen to your body, and remember, body confidence all begins with living in tune with your menstrual cycle.